Hello, my name is Sarah Schumann. I crew on fishing vessels in Rhode Island and Alaska, and I also direct the Fishery Friendly Climate Action Campaign, which is a bicoastal, network-based initiative that aims to develop the commercial fishing industry's leadership on climate issues and urge the prioritization of fishery-friendly climate solutions. This video is an introduction for U.S. commercial fishermen on the topic of marine carbon dioxide removal, or mCDR. Marine carbon dioxide removal refers to a set of strategies that have been proposed to gradually remove some of the heat-trapping gas carbon dioxide from the atmosphere by enhancing or speeding up naturally occurring biological and chemical processes that occur in the ocean. In this presentation, we'll learn more about 6 proposed mCDR methods, which are shown in this graphic. These methods can be divided into chemistry-based approaches that leverage the ocean's inorganic carbon pump, and into biology-based approaches that leverage the ocean's organic carbon pump. To understand the rationale for marine carbon dioxide removal, it's helpful to start with an understanding of the Earth's carbon cycle, shown here. The carbon cycle is a dynamic process that moves carbon through the atmosphere, land, and the ocean. In a natural state, carbon entering the atmosphere and carbon removed from the atmosphere by photosynthesis and other processes are roughly in equilibrium. Global climate change results in part from this balance between atmospheric and non-atmospheric carbon getting out of equilibrium, which is caused both by an acceleration of processes that transfer carbon from the Earth to the atmosphere, most notably the burning of fossil fuels and the depletion of carbon held in the soil and vegetation due to agriculture and land clearing, combined with a reduction in photosynthetic activity that would be capable of transferring carbon back out of the atmosphere. The ocean plays a crucial role in the Earth's carbon cycle by absorbing a significant portion of atmospheric carbon dioxide, which has helped regulate global temperatures to date. Through processes like photosynthesis by marine plants, seaweed, and phytoplankton, carbon is converted into organic matter, supporting diverse marine ecosystems and fisheries. When marine organisms die, their carbon-rich remains, if they're not eaten, sink to the bottom of the ocean floor, sequestering carbon for long periods of time and contributing to long-term climate stability. That's the biological carbon pump. Another pathway for carbon to come out of the atmosphere is the chemical carbon pump, in which carbon dioxide molecules from the air become dissolved in seawater and then react with molecules already present in the seawater to form 2 new kinds of molecules called bicarbonate and carbonate, which makes way for new carbon dioxide molecules to then again become dissolved out of the atmosphere and into the ocean. Marine carbon dioxide removal, or mCDR, seeks to intentionally speed up these natural processes to draw down and or store more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in the ocean. mCDR is part of a larger category of carbon dioxide removal, or CDR, approaches that involve removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and durably storing it in reservoirs such as vegetation, soils, geological formations, the ocean, or in manufactured products. Other examples of CDR include direct air capture, which extracts CO2 directly from the atmosphere using machinery and passing it through filters or chemicals that remove CO2 before releasing air back into the atmosphere, as well as soil carbon sequestration, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, and afforestation and reforestation. Interest in CDR has increased since the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, declared in 2018 that there is no feasible way to achieve the carbon neutrality or net zero greenhouse gas emissions goals that must be reached by 2050 in order to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius without relying on CDR. More specifically, as this graph shows, these scientists project that CDR practices and technologies need to scale up significantly to the point where they can remove 10 gigatons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year, which is equivalent to about a quarter of the volume of carbon dioxide currently emitted annually. As the revelations about the major need for investment in CDR have emerged, the scientific community has begun focusing on marine CDR in a bigger way. On the right of this screen, you can see a report by the National Academies of Sciences from 2022 and another report from NOAA in 2023. Both of these reports explore what we know about mCDR, as well as what questions which are many, still need to be answered. In the next few slides, I'll be drawing on these reports and other sources to look at 6 different mCDR methods, touching on their scientific and technical maturity, knowledge gaps, environmental, social, and environmental justice concerns, and regulatory needs that should be addressed prior to deployment. We'll start with methods that leverage the ocean's chemical carbon pump, and then we'll cover methods that leverage its biological carbon pump. Ocean alkalinity enhancement is one of those methods. This is the addition of alkaline materials into seawater with the intention of increasing the ocean's natural carbon uptake. As we alluded to earlier in our overview of the Earth's carbon cycle, when carbon dioxide from the air is dissolved in seawater, it combines with molecules already in the water to form bicarbonate and carbonate molecules. These molecules are stable forms of carbon that do not re-enter the atmosphere. Ocean alkalinity enhancement, or OAE, is the deliberate addition of alkaline substances to the ocean, which is thought to increase the rate at which dissolved CO2 is converted into stable bicarbonate and carbonate molecules, in turn enabling the ocean to absorb more CO2 from the air to restore equilibrium. This reaction is outlined in red at the left of the screen. There are 2 different approaches to OAE that are thought to be capable of accomplishing this increased rate of conversion from dissolved CO2 to bicarbonate and carbonate molecules. The first, outlined here in red, is to simply add alkaline materials to seawater. These could be minerals, like lime or olivine, which are mined on land, as shown in this image. This approach is called enhanced rock weathering because it accelerates natural rock weathering cycles to capture additional carbon dioxide. Mineral alkalinity of this sort can be added along the beach, from a ship, or even upland. Alkalinity can also be derived from seawater itself through a process called electrochemical ocean alkalinity enhancement, which is shown in the upper portion of the screen. In electrochemical OAE, electrolysis or electrodialysis can be used to rearrange the water and salt molecules in a portion of seawater into an acid solution and a basic solution. The basic solution can then be added back into surrounding seawater to enhance its alkalinity. The acidic stream resulting from electrochemical OAE could then be disposed of after being neutralized, or it could be combined with silicate rocks to produce products like glass, or even used to produce hydrogen gas for use in energy. Electrochemical OAE may be best suited to occur at existing coastal infrastructure equipped with seawater intake or outfall pipes, such as desalination and wastewater plants. It could also be co-located with offshore energy installations such as offshore wind turbines, which could produce the electricity needed to power these reactions. Alternatively, one could add alkalinity in liquid form dispersed from ships, such as sodium hydroxide. This is the form of OAE that is proposed in a project by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, or WHOI, called Loch Ness, which is short for locking away ocean carbon in the northeast shelf and slope. A second chemistry-based mCDR method, direct ocean capture, sounds quite similar to electrochemical OAE to non-experts like me, and probably many of you, because both processes use electricity to perform electrochemical processes on a portion of seawater that has been temporarily diverted from the sea. But here's the difference. Electrochemical OAE, which we discussed a minute ago, splits the portion of diverted seawater into an acidic and an alkaline stream, and then returns the alkaline stream to the surrounding seawater. In contrast, direct ocean capture, or DOC for short, applies an acidic solution to the diverted seawater in order to actually strip carbon dioxide molecules out of the water. These 2 processes can be coupled together, with DOC following right after electrochemical OAE, such that the acidic solutions produced by electrical OAE are then used to perform direct ocean capture. This way, we could get more bang for our buck in terms of CO2 removed. The end products of direct ocean capture are carbon dioxide gas and carbon dioxide depleted seawater. The CO2 depleted seawater, as I said, is discharged back into the ocean so it can perform additional uptake of CO2 from the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide gas that has been removed from the seawater must be stored either in geological formations or for use in consumer products. A large amount of electricity is needed to perform electrochemical reactions. Therefore, optimal sites for DOC might include areas with high availability of renewable energy. For instance, DOC infrastructure can be co-located with offshore wind farms, as in the image shown here, or with existing onshore infrastructure such as desalination plants or infrastructure to support or store carbon dioxide into geological formations. Now we'll move into the biology-based mCDR methods. Macroalgae cultivation and sinking involves the large-scale cultivation of seaweeds specifically for the purpose of sequestering carbon dioxide. Currently, seaweed is cultivated for use in human food products, animal feeds, fertilizer, and other productive uses, shown in the inset box at the lower right. However, while harvesting seaweed and using it for these purposes can provide important climate benefits, for example by replacing more carbon-intensive food sources or for use as carbon-neutral biofuels, those uses do not represent carbon removal, because they do not remove and store carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Instead, those carbon molecules are re-emitted, for example, when biofuels are combusted or when a human digests and respires CO2 from some seaweed back into the atmosphere. To count as true carbon removal, the carbon sequestered by seaweed via photosynthesis must be locked away somewhere where those carbon molecules cannot re-enter the atmosphere for hundreds or thousands of years. In the context of mCDR, the most cost-effective and scalable approach would simply be to cultivate large amounts of seaweed and sink it directly to the ocean floor. This can either occur passively underneath a seaweed farm, as shown in the center of this picture, or it can occur much more durably when seaweed is actively sunk into the deepest areas of the ocean, as shown on the right. In this way, the carbon from the seaweed's biomass can decompose without entering the atmosphere. Intentional sinking of seaweed biomass may be able to accomplish carbon sequestration that is stable for timescales on the order of hundreds of years. The deeper the water and the further it is located from upwelling zones, the longer this timescale may extend. Continental shelf and slope sediments may represent storage of decades to millennia, depending on depth, resuspension, and oxygen availability. The areas of the globe that appear best suited for macroalgae cultivation are those with high nutrient availability, which includes mostly high latitude as well as a few mid-latitude locations. However, macroalgae cultivation and sinking is space-intensive and may compete with other uses of the ocean. The area of macroalgae cultivation required to affect carbon dynamics on a global scale is large, with an estimate that growing enough biomass to sequester 0.1 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year would require an area equivalent to a 100-meter strip along 63% of the global coastline along all continents and islands. To address this spatial challenge, macroalgae can be grown in the open ocean, but growing coastal macroalgae species in a novel open ocean environment creates ecological concerns. Ocean fertilization, also called microalgae cultivation and carbon sequestration, is the process of adding micronutrients like iron or macronutrients, such as phosphorus and nitrogen, to the ocean's surface in order to increase photosynthetic uptake of carbon dioxide by phytoplankton. As phytoplankton that are not consumed by larger organisms die and decompose, their sinking bodies result in the transport of organic carbon to the deep ocean where it can be stored long term. Iron fertilization is likely best suited to occur in the Southern Ocean, subarctic North Pacific, and eastern equatorial Pacific due to iron limitations in those regions. Proposed locations for nitrogen and phosphate fertilization include much of the global ocean in the tropics and subtropics, where either nitrogen or phosphorus are the key nutrient-limiting primary productivity. Some field trials with ocean iron fertilization already took place in the 90s in the Southern Ocean, but the results of those experiments were mixed. They did stimulate a phytoplankton bloom, but the bloom was mostly diatoms, which would be remineralized in the water column without being sequestered down into the deep ocean. Therefore, the ability of ocean fertilization to actually store carbon is still a big unknown. A final category of mCDR includes artificial upwelling and artificial downwelling, or enhanced ocean circulation, collectively. Artificial upwelling accelerates the transport of nutrient-rich waters from deep waters to the ocean surface, stimulating phytoplankton blooms and the photosynthesis they perform that converts carbon dioxide into living matter. Artificial downwelling accelerates the transport of that living matter to the deep sea to store it away at depth so the carbon is not re-emitted to the atmosphere. Both methods are energy intensive and would only be cost effective if deployed in conjunction with renewable marine energy sources. They face large engineering hurdles and high costs and are generally considered low viability, which bars any major investment in their technological advancement. As with nitrogen and phosphorus fertilization, artificial upwelling is likely best suited to tropical and subtropical waters where nutrients are depleted at the surface. Artificial downwelling may be most applicable where major downwelling currents are located, such as the North Atlantic deep water near Greenland and the Atlantic bottom water. Marine carbon dioxide removal is generally considered different from the blue carbon approach that many of us are more familiar with. Blue carbon refers to the vegetated coastal ecosystems that store carbon in their underlying substrates. Examples of these ecosystems include mangrove forests, salt marshes, and seagrass beds. Marine habitat restoration offers many benefits to ecosystems and their communities, including improved water quality, protection from erosion, reduced flooding from sea level rise, enhanced fisheries, and support for ecotourism and economic opportunities for local communities. However, the climate mitigation potential of blue carbon restoration is projected to be relatively low compared to mCDR due to these habitats' limited spatial availability and the likelihood that the health and spatial coverage of these habitats will decline as a result of climate change. Blue carbon is generally not lumped in with mCDR because they differ in terms of their potential scale of carbon removal and the maturity of our collective knowledge about how they work, with blue carbon being well understood while mCDR is in its infancy and surrounded by many unknowns. They also differ in terms of their known and potential interactions with natural ecosystems and will likely be regulated differently. For these reasons, blue carbon, while taking place in the marine and coastal environment, is not considered marine carbon dioxide removal or mCDR. This graph compares these mCDR approaches in terms of their carbon removal effectiveness, which is shown on the y-axis, and their cost, which is shown along the x-axis, as well as the duration of their carbon storage, which is represented by the size of the bubble. The colors of the bubble are not relevant for our discussion. This graph is from a NOAA white paper, and those bubble colors represent NOAA's readiness to provide scientific expertise on each mCDR technique. What this graph shows is that the biggest win-win-wins in terms of effectiveness, cost, and durability of carbon storage are predicted to lie in ocean alkalinity enhancement. Direct ocean capture also likely offers a high degree of effectiveness and durability, but it's projected to be quite expensive. Artificial upwelling and downwelling don't appear to score well on any of the three metrics, which is why these techniques are generally overlooked by mCDR experts as low priorities for development. Macroalgae cultivation and sinking and ocean fertilization both appear to be relatively affordable, but they don't appear to be capable of matching the chemistry-based mCDR techniques in terms of their effectiveness and durability. This graph also shows other CDR techniques for comparison, such as direct air capture, coastal blue carbon, and soil carbon. Looking at this graph makes it apparent why the chemistry-based mCDR techniques are worth exploring as potential paths forward to combat atmospheric concentrations of heat-warming carbon dioxide. We can also compare the mCDR methods in terms of their potential ecological impacts, which we'll explore in the next two slides. First, we'll look at potential co-benefits of each method, and I do have to stress that these are potential because very little is yet known about the actual impacts that may occur. All mCDR methods could, in theory, lead to localized mitigation of ocean acidification, which can have benefits for shelled organisms and for ocean food webs. Some mCDR methods, including ocean alkalinity enhancement, ocean fertilization, and artificial upwelling, may also stimulate primary productivity by microalgae at the base of the food web. In the case of ocean fertilization and artificial upwelling, this is precisely what they are designed to do, and it's how they accomplish their carbon removal. Increased productivity could have benefits for higher trophic levels, including fish yields. However, this would come at the expense of carbon removed. Lastly, Macroalgae cultivation can assist with nutrient remediation if it's situated in overly nitrogen-rich estuaries or polluted coastal waters. And while it's living, it can also offer nursery and refuge habitat for fish and other marine life. Potential adverse impacts from mCDR methods are more varied. Any mCDR approaches that boost phytoplankton production, which includes alkalinity enhancement, ocean fertilization, and artificial upwelling, could cause a change to the species composition of the phytoplankton community, which could have implications for animals up the food chain, including commercially harvested fish species. Those that involve mineral inputs, namely mineral OAE, including enhanced rock weathering and iron fertilization, may introduce contaminants that are found in those minerals. These approaches would also involve an expansion of mining activity on land, which could have upland and upstream impacts. Approaches that introduce alkalinity into seawater could cause alkalosis of invertebrates, which is a physiological condition where the body fluids of an invertebrate organism become too alkaline. Approaches that involve pumping of seawater could cause mortality of microorganisms through entrainment. These approaches include electrochemical alkalinity enhancement, direct ocean capture, and artificial upwelling and downwelling. Biology-based mCDR approaches, if effective, create organic matter that falls to the benthos. Once there, this material could lead to acidification, anoxia, and other impacts to benthic food webs. Nutrient robbing is another side effect that could occur with biology-based approaches. Nutrient robbing occurs when macronutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus that are utilized by the increased phytoplankton populations stimulated by iron fertilization become unavailable for biological production and associated carbon uptake elsewhere. When this happens, it's unclear whether iron fertilization actually adds to the carbon uptake taking place or if it simply shifts the location of this uptake. This could also have implications for the biota that depend on existing phytoplankton distribution in the ocean. Macroalgae cultivation, whether it's done for carbon removal, food, or fuel, can cause impacts to local seaweed populations via genetic interactions and disease. It could also compete with phytoplankton and benthic algae by occupying surface areas most exposed to sunlight and shading the water column underneath. Lastly, both macroalgae cultivation and artificial upwelling and downwelling can introduce debris into the water column, as well as structures, lines, and mooring structures, which may become entangled with marine life. In the next few slides, I will give a lay of the land that will help us situate where mCDR is right now in its development, what the next steps might be, and who's leading the way. The mCDR ecosystem, as shown in this screen, currently includes researchers, companies, investors, philanthropy, nonprofits, and environmental non-governmental organizations, NGOs, or nonprofits. Currently, mCDR is in the research or the prove-out phase, so a lot of these entities involved are focused on research, development, and evaluation. This is necessary to find out how effective these methods are, how measurable their carbon removal is, and what their co-impacts could be. Funding or financing for mCDR research is coming from three sources: private companies and impact investors, public funding, such as federal grants, and philanthropy. Private companies typically fund mCDR through pre-purchases and impact investing opportunities. The largest pre-purchase effort has been facilitated through Stripe Climate and funded via corporations like Shopify, Microsoft, and Google. Called Frontier Carbon Solutions, this pre-purchase effort is an advance market commitment that aims to accelerate development of CDR by guaranteeing future demand. Its goal is to pre-purchase $1 billion of permanent carbon removal credits directly from CDR companies by 2030, and these may include marine carbon dioxide removal. Public government funding typically supports the efforts of academic institutions to resolve key research questions relating to mCDR. Government funding so far has been awarded through the National Oceanographic Partnership Program, or NOP, in a funding round managed by NOAA, as well as through two separate funding streams managed by the Department of Energy. U.S. federal research funding for mCDR totals over $60 million to date. Philanthropic funding is distributed to a wide variety of actors in the mCDR space, including NGOs, mCDR coordinators, and mCDR companies. Companies that are active in the mCDR space may be of several types. Some are focused on developing marketable tools and methods to quantify or track the carbon removed through mCDR, while others are interested in selling the carbon credits generated by mCDR. Companies selling credits for marine carbon dioxide removal are called mCDR suppliers or mCDR providers because they supply or provide offset credits to companies who are seeking to meet their internally set voluntary greenhouse gas reduction targets or who are seeking to comply with mandated greenhouse gas reduction goals set in jurisdictions that have capped their total emissions. This slide shows some of the mCDR startups that are currently involved in field testing the mCDR methods we've been discussing. They include Ebb Carbon, which specializes in electrochemical alkalinity enhancement, Planetary, which is adding magnesium hydroxide to neutralize carbon dioxide, Carbon Run, which adds alkalinity to rivers, Vesta, which adds alkalinity to beaches, Aquatic and Captura, which specialize in direct ocean capture, and Carboniferous and the former company Running Tide, which specialize in macroalgae cultivation and sinking. NGOs and nonprofit mCDR coordinators operating in the mCDR space are focused on advancing responsible and equitable mCDR research and development. They're building public awareness and understanding of mCDR and engaging with policymakers to ensure conservation, local community, and biodiversity values are included in development. NGOs active in the mCDR space include the World Resources Institute, Ocean Conservancy, Environmental Defense Fund, and Aspen Institute, which are largely focused on advocating for environmentally and socially responsible mCDR. Other nonprofits like Seaworthy are focused on monitoring, reporting, and verification, or MRV, to ensure that carbon removal is real and verifiable. A handful of nonprofit organizations, which we're calling mCDR coordinators, provide coordination, funding, and work on enabling conditions for mCDR activities. These coordinators include Ocean Visions, which is working on building supportive frameworks to advance mCDR solutions and support critical research and development, Carbon 180, which is designing policies that will bring carbon removal solutions to gigaton scale, and Carbon to Sea initiative, which is a regranter of pooled philanthropic funds that is focused specifically on the feasibility of ocean alkalinity enhancement as a safe and scalable carbon capture technology. Academic institutions are also involved, as are government researchers and scientists at the Department of Energy and NOAA. While mCDR researchers are located at various different academic institutions, including but not limited to those shown here, one of the leading ones is the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, or WHOI, which is leveraging its in-house expertise in ocean biogeochemistry to position itself at the forefront of scientific research on both ocean alkalinity enhancement and ocean iron fertilization. Other academic institutions like Columbia University's Sabin Center and American University's Institute for Carbon Removal are focused on the social and policy aspects of mCDR. The American Geophysical Union is a leading professional association where mCDR researchers are exchanging their knowledge with one another. Fisheries scientists have only recently begun to get involved in understanding the effects of mCDR on fishery ecosystems and communities. But for instance, an international virtual workshop was held in fall 2024 through the International Council for Exploration of the Seas, or ICES, which was led within the U.S. by scientists at NOAA Northeast Fisheries Science Center. Let's talk a little about the regulatory landscape for mCDR. At the international level and domestically inside the United States, there is no single comprehensive legal framework specific to mCDR research or scaled mCDR deployment. However, projects could be subject to a variety of general environmental and other laws. Because those laws were developed to regulate other activities, however, there is often uncertainty as to how they would apply to mCDR research and deployment. At the international level, any mCDR approach that releases substances into the ocean, which would include ocean alkalinity enhancement and ocean fertilization, may be subject to the London Protocol of 1996 and the London Convention of 1975. This is an international treaty that regulates the disposal of waste into the ocean. At the U.S. federal level, the London Protocol is implemented through the Marine Protection, Research, and Sanctuaries Act, or MPRSA, under the authority of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. The MPRSA covers activities that involve dumping of any substance into ocean waters, including international, federal, and state waters, but not bays and harbors, whenever that material is transported from within the U.S. or on a vessel registered in the U.S., or whenever the dumping of the materials occurs within 12 nautical miles of the U.S. coast. Under the MPRSA, the EPA can grant general permits for the dumping of materials that will have minimal adverse impacts on the environment, or it can grant research permits if it determines that the scientific merit of a project outweighs the anticipated environmental impacts. Discharges of pollutants from point sources such as outfall pipes into waters of the United States or within a bay or harbor are regulated under the Clean Water Act. These activities require a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES, permit. mCDR methods that would require a permit under NPDES could include alkalinity that's added at an existing wastewater treatment or desalination plant, or alkalinity added by a vessel within a bay or harbor. However, one of the advantages of using existing wastewater treatment or desalination plants is that they already are likely to possess an NPDES permit. Any activity that could obstruct navigability may require a permit from the U.S. Coast Guard under the Aids to Navigation program. These activities may also require a permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers under Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act. Such activities in an mCDR context are likely to include artificial upwelling and downwelling, macroalgae cultivation, and could also even include direct ocean capture or ocean alkalinity enhancement if it's using floating or anchored structures. All federally permitted activities in the ocean must also comply with any relevant regulations or consultation requirements found in NEPA, the Endangered Species Act, Marine Mammal Protection Act, Magnuson-Stevens Act, and consistency provisions of the Coastal Zone Management Act. And at the state level, some states already have regulations that govern the cultivation of macroalgae within state waters. Moving from research scale to commercial scale mCDR is contingent upon gaining a much better understanding of whether and how mCDR approaches work, what their economic prospects are like, and what their co-impacts are. And then, if justified by data, putting a more robust governance and permitting system in place as well. The forms of mCDR research that are presently being conducted include modeling, laboratory and mesocosm studies, social science studies on stakeholder engagement, economics, and policy implications of mCDR, and increasingly, field trials or pilot projects, which are considered a necessary step to answer many of the remaining questions facing mCDR at this stage. You can pause the video before going on to the next screen if you'd like to take a closer look at the kinds of questions that researchers are trying to answer with each different kind of research. The next set of slides is taken from this map of mCDR field trials, which is available at oceanvisions.org/mcdr-field-trials. New trials are being added to this database all the time, so check it out for up-to-date information from the nonprofit Ocean Visions. As stated in the last slide, many members of the research community consider field trials to be an indispensable next step towards advancing the state of knowledge on mCDR. Some field trials are already taking place around the U.S. coast, and we're going to look at those in the next few slides. The mCDR approaches that are tested through existing and planned field experiments include various forms of alkalinity enhancement, direct ocean capture, and the sinking of macroalgae and other biomass. Let's take a look at these projects region by region. In Washington's Olympic Peninsula, the mCDR startup Ebb Carbon is conducting experiments in Sequim and Port Angeles to measure and model carbon dioxide removal through an electrochemical ocean alkalinity enhancement process that passes seawater through a series of membranes to filter out acid from the seawater. Once the acid is removed, the alkaline seawater is returned to the estuary to absorb additional CO2 from the air. Field studies are helping to understand how well these processes work at removing carbon and how well they work at mitigating ocean acidification, and to find out what impacts they could have on local marine life, with a priority on oysters and eelgrass epifauna, which are important food source for salmon. The project in SQUIM is a smaller scale project, removing 100 tons of carbon dioxide a year, which is taking place at the Department of Energy's Pacific Northwest National Lab. This project has been in operation for over a year. The Port Angeles project is newer and larger, aiming to remove up to 1,000 tons of CO2 over 2 years. It's significant because it recently became the first mCDR project to secure a NIPDES permit under the Clean Water Act. In partnership with a local wastewater treatment plant in San Francisco Bay, researchers from the University of Hawaii, UCLA, and the nonprofit Seaworthy are conducting an experiment that adds alkalinity to ocean water using sodium hydroxide and a tracer dye to test its effects on removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. At AltaSea, a public-private research hub based in the Port of Los Angeles, mCDR startup Aquatic is building a pilot electrochemical alkalinity enhancement plant that converts dissolved carbon dioxide in seawater into limestone and the mineral brucite, and then returns the more alkaline seawater to the ocean. The process is also producing hydrogen gas, which can be used as a fuel. Also at AltaSea, a different mCDR startup, Captura, is experimenting with a direct ocean capture system, which is powered by renewable energy. It's using electrodialysis technology to capture CO2 directly from seawater and deliver it as a measurable stream that can be permanently sequestered or utilized, then returning CO2 depleted seawater to the ocean to absorb additional CO2 from the atmosphere. California is also the host to a few projects exploring efficacy of macroalgae sinking. 3 projects led by the University of California at Santa Barbara have placed kelp at the bottom of deep basins and then measured the kelp's degradation over time to determine the biochemical fates of fixed carbon in macroalgae. On the U.S. East Coast, ocean alkalinity enhancement has been the most explored mCDR method to date. Mineral OAE has been the subject of at least 5 field trials. In the North Sea Beach Colony, a community located in Little Peconic Bay on Long Island, New York, mCDR startup Vesta added olivine, a natural alkaline mineral, into sand that was used for a beach renourishment project. Then Vesta documented the rate at which the olivine sand dissolved, as well as its efficiency at removing carbon and its environmental impacts. 2 years of monitoring work to date have so far indicated no significant ecological impacts. Another Vesta field trial involved the placement of 7,000 cubic yards of olivine sand along a coastal beach in Duck, North Carolina. The olivine sand is being deployed by a scow as a near-shore berm, and researchers will monitor the effect for 3 years to track the movement of this olivine sand. A third trial led by Vesta is taking place in partnership with Hui in a salt marsh on the Herring River in Cape Cod. Researchers will treat the marsh with olivine sand, just like the experiments in Long Island and Duck, North Carolina, and then collect data to assess the safety, efficacy, co-benefits, and the potential for large-scale implementation of enhanced weathering in tidal wetlands as opposed to beach environments. A team from the University of Rhode Island will test mineral OAE by liming a coastal golf course. Liming is already part of many golf courses' routine lawn care practices. They will then monitor the carbon chemistry of a small coastal lagoon located near the golf course before and after the application of the lime. A project led by mCDR startup Vicarb, located on the waterfront of the Brooklyn Navy Yard, is adding minerals to the waters of the East River to test a CO2 neutralization process and pioneer a new carbon sensing technology developed by the company. The East Coast also has a few examples of non-mineral OAE field trials. The Loch Ness Project, short for Locking Away Carbon in the Northeast Shelf and Slope, led by a team of researchers from Hui, is planning a controlled release of 50% sodium hydroxide mixed with a tracer dye into surface waters in the Wilkinson's Basin in the Gulf of Maine. The researchers will evaluate the effectiveness of various monitoring approaches to track changes in surrounding ocean alkalinity and subsequent carbon dioxide uptake. They also aim to better understand any potential co-impacts to the marine environment and to other uses of the ocean. This project is significant because it is the first mCDR project to apply to the EPA for a research permit under the Marine Protection Research and Sanctuaries Act, or MPRSA. Further south, a project led by researchers at the University of Maryland and the mCDR startup Planetary is adding alkalinity at a wastewater treatment plant in the Hampton Roads Sanitation District in Virginia, located on the Elizabeth River in the Chesapeake Bay. Many wastewater facilities already treat wastewater with alkalinity, and permits to allow alkalinity discharge may already exist, but their carbon removal has not been quantified. This project will run several tests on the existing alkalinity stream to better understand its effects on carbon removal. mCDR startup Carboniferous is experimenting with biomass sinking in deep anoxic basins, which are naturally occurring deep-sea formations where bathymetry prevents mixing, and water is often stagnant for thousands of years, creating the perfect conditions for preservation of plant matter. Carboniferous is using terrestrial materials as their biomass source, including agricultural byproducts like corn stalks, which are rich in hard-to-break-down molecules like lignin and cellulose. I hope you found this overview useful. mCDR is a complex topic because it's very new. Little is known about how well and under what conditions it might be most effective, or about its environmental and social impacts, which could be either negative or positive, depending on the method. Moreover, mCDR is not a single type of activity, but instead a set of at least 6 different approaches that are lumped together because they take place in the same place, the ocean, and they hope to accomplish the same goal, which is the enhanced removal of atmospheric carbon dioxide. But they are otherwise quite diverse in their mechanisms, potential impacts, and even in their potential efficacy at this carbon removal goal. If any of the proposed mCDR techniques do prove to be viable at scale and justified even after comparing the benefits to the risks, they could scale rapidly. Since the need to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is urgent, and climate scientists now agree that the goal of balancing emissions out at net zero by 2050 will not be possible without some form of carbon dioxide removal. Therefore, the time for fishermen to get involved in understanding and participating in dialogues around mCDR is now. To find out more about how fishermen are organizing themselves on this issue, please visit fisheryfriendlyclimateaction.org and head to the Marine Carbon Dioxide Removal page, or scan this QR code to get there. You can also reach out to me, Sarah Schumann, at fisheryfriendlyclimateaction@gmail.com. I hope you learned something of value from this presentation and that you'll consider joining with me and your fellow fishermen to carve out a strong voice for the fishing industry in the emerging field of mCDR.